see your Bluetooth. Oh, yeah, not connecting. How to pair a trackpad with Vision even though it's connected to a Mac. Oh, hello. I'm just trying to pair the trackpad here. There we go. Did I? Oh. Arg. No, it's where is it used? Okay. Turn off the music. Okay, that's better. Hello.
Good morning.
Morning, morning. You can probably see yourself here in the reflection. Yeah, I just realized I hadn't managed to get the trackpad to pair, but that's okay. Hang on, take this back off. It turns out Apple only has a black keyboard with numerics. You can't get a black keyboard with just the basic keys, which is kind of weird. Anyway, how is everyone this morning so far?
Very good. I will have to bow out after the first hour to provide transport for Mom. So if there's anything that needs my input, make sure it's covered within that window.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
I will too.
Okay, yeah, well, I'm glad you guys are here. So we're having an introduction from Fabienne joining us today as well. The French name, Alain Marsili would be the English version. So he'll be coming in to show us something that I can't understand yet. It'll be interesting. Yeah, I think there's quite a few things to discuss today, so it'll be fun.
You saw I put a couple of things in the project Slack thing that had come in, sort of bridging across the future text. I thought Yuli's posted about the keyboards in the Ars Technica article.
Yeah.
I don't think any of it would surprise us. I mainly put the Ars Technica one because I just thought it's all useful collateral to the information we're building up.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely worthwhile. Okay, to kind of start on that note.
Oh, can we see your persona, Frode?
No.
That bad?
How would you be able to do that?
Well, didn't they say that you could interact with people who are in Zoom using your persona from the Vision Pro?
Yes, but I'm not in the US, so I don't have an American iTunes account, so I cannot download any apps, including Zoom.
Oh,
yeah. So
Apple has to fix that.
But I have learned over the last few days, I have what we impolitely call resting bitch face. That's what the kids call it these days. And in my persona, it's even worse. I look like I'm, all the time. So, yeah, it's not the best. It's been interesting. Hi, Fabienne.
Hello.
So here's the thing. I'll just throw it out while there's just the six of us. Having spent time now, as you also have, Fabienne, in the Vision, and you, Rob, in terms of work, if you have an opportunity to sit at a normal, nice screen, there's absolutely no benefit to using the Vision Pro at all currently. So obviously, hopefully we can fix that. or part of the time. Am I wrong? Discuss.
Well, so one silly things I did, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, I bought some kind of a laptop holder that I could fix on a tree trunk and on the glass windows at home. So I do have a need to interact with digital content, including documents, but I don't like to have to be behind my desk, and including in some, let's say, strange things like being reading in the middle of a park. So it's the comparison goes only up to a certain extent, and I also, it's not the same as a phone. Like I want also something that has quality input. So I don't know if it's if it's only that. I don't think it's interesting. I think it can do more than that, and I think just the ability to move around to read in a stranger place than just behind my desk, to me there are some benefits to it. It's of course limited in terms of price and readability and even the battery, etc. But yeah, I still think there are some things to explore with, let's say, just that model.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. I'm Norwegian English, so I'm going to be very careful with pronouncing French names. So I'm going to go with hello.
Bonjour.
We look forward to hearing from you in a bit when everyone is here. Currently, we are talking about. I was just throwing out the statement that so far, even though I love the Vision Pro, I really don't find any benefit working. I usually take it into town when I'm at a really wonderful coffee shop, and I tend to find that even a 13-inch MacBook screen, which of course is far from ideal, is okay. Putting on the headset and moving it up. Apple has done some things really well with the text screen. And I now have the working version of Author, native version. Of course, it doesn't do everything, but just getting the screen right and all that, it shockingly to me doesn't provide me with that much more affordance. And I think that is why what we're dealing with on the Wednesday with the Sloan, which is trying to use the space, the width of the space more than the depth, because depth, we often talk about putting things there. It kind of gets messy in the background because even in the Vision, if you have two apps semi-overlapping each other, it becomes a bit messy. I don't know what you guys think about that so far.
Out of curiosity, did you play with in the browser specifically with different windows? So to clarify for people who are not necessarily used to it, but you of course, so you put the headset on, you have the browser window as you have on your desktop. You can have different tabs, but you can have different windows from Safari open. So you can have, let's say, a PDF there, page there, another page. I think even like you can freely position them. So I'm wondering if you played a bit with that.
No, I haven't played much with that, not with the browser, but I have had different PDFs open the browser. So I've done many things, but even now when I'm working on my PhD revisions, I don't often need that many documents open that wouldn't necessarily fit on a 27-inch screen. So that's why the competition for me is very much the screen, because we talk about a headset being like a thinking cap. And similarly, I guess we can say that our big screens that we have at our home or desk is also like a thinking cap compared to a laptop in a casual situation. Mark?
Yeah, I find it really interesting, especially this last couple of things, the Ars Technica article and Yuli's one about the keyboard. It is interesting because I found myself reading that thinking, I agree, but also I'm thinking, to what extent do we do this classic thing that we take the thing we're really used to and then complain massively that the thing that we're very used to now doesn't work in the new space, which could lead you to one of two conclusions. Either the new thing is useless because it doesn't work with the old, or merely we're reminding ourselves that we need a new form of interaction. And that's sort of the thing I think we've been beginning to discuss on the Wednesdays. It's not going to replace everything. But I'm also thinking, so if I'm working in XR, how much of that actually has to be typed input, literally typing text, or is it more consumption and triage and moving things around, or tasks that could be done within a sort of, palette of affordances? I don't know, but I think this is the interesting exploration. I don't doubt that the text input will lag physically, perhaps more than the sort of software side, simply as we work out what's practical in the new interactive experience. Frode?
I don't actually have a problem with text input, because using a physical keyboard with the native app is really actually quite fine. It works flawlessly. Now, I was thinking earlier today about introducing a joystick into our XR experience. And I don't mean a proper flight joystick. I mean like a toy joystick that just has, let's say, 4 degrees of movement. Because one of our big issues, of course, Fabienne will have one. Let's have a look. Well, no, that's not a bad idea too, because when in history have people decided when they're thinking they want to have less in their hands? We always want to have something in our hands. So the input is fine, but even just and this is not a complaint. It is just for me to say that I think what we are doing is more important, because we are not coming at this purely as fanboys saying XR is better, end of story. So it makes it more interesting. Hussein, please.
Hi, so I've recently just bought the Quest, and it's my first experience of using VR. Where I've used it as probably a different user to you guys, because I'm not actually typing much. I'm using it more for consumption, rather than having my laptop on top of my quill and balancing it along with everything else that I'm balancing, like a cup of coffee or something, or maybe not coffee at night, but rather than having something there, just having it in front of me and placing my screen where I want it has been really useful to me in that sense. So from my current setup, okay, I don't have a 27-inch screen that I use for my normal sort of use. I do in the office, but that's more for the staff. But just my normal use is usually just a laptop with me reading a PDF document. But this has been good that I've been able to just set up my screens with the desktop and a reader in the Quest. So that's where it's benefited me. When I tried on your Vision Pro, it was a lot clearer, as in just the general view of the sort of AR use was a lot clearer. But yeah, that's my use of the VR so far.
Yeah, one thing that has become clear to me over the weekend while thinking about all the views and stuff is, and I know it's obvious, but interaction is really where we should be focusing. So without going into too much Wednesday work, we now have a nice way to view a row of text, a column of text, like a reference section, and interact with it. It's coming along really well. So now what we need to do is allow you, wherever you come across stuff, to be able to do stuff. We can't have that to be a static world, and that comes back to, the question of how much of this can be done on a screen. Now, Adam has made me do panoramas in Photoshop that I then put into photos and then view on the headset to give a sense of a lot of text around, which is really, really useful. And what I have seen already is the mock-up we have with 100 references just in a row is kind of readable in the Vision in XR. But when I try to fit it on my screen in Keynote, it's just, it gets too tiny. So that is the beginning of understanding how the space helps. Hello, Leon. So I'm not sure about Adam and Dini, but just doing just a few text messages. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, I think there could be a lot of potential for programmers taking advantage of that extra spatial dimension. So much of what we do is based upon what nested scope we're operating inside of. So it'd be very interesting to see if you could imagine starting at the highest level of the program and then just have the environment around you zoom in so that you're at the next nested scope, and maybe have some secondary side panels to tell you what current bindings of variable names are floating off to the side.
Yeah, I think
So I know it's not the standard scholarly use case, but it's so closely analogous that looking at coding in XR as opposed to coding for XR could be an interesting, maybe a follow-on grant down the road to dive into it at a later point.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, Peter, using the space for that. Now, one thing that I've been asking a few friends recently is there used to be something called Flash and there used to be something called HyperCard. Is there any software today where you can make something with interactions without programming, please mind, and then share that?
There is Reality Composer. The scope of the interactivity is you'll need to use a Reality Composer on your iPad today. A Reality Composer Pro on Mac is a slightly different. But that's something that people are interested in a lot of places, and there are other people following that kind of model in a lot of other different ways. So the Reality Composer has a sort of a click on, like a card-based interaction schema where you say, like, when I click on this, I want that thing to turn big. When I click on that, I want, or when I move close to this, then I want it to play a sound. It's not amazing in terms of its the ability for that to be able to scale today. So if you saw the Do You Like Mudkips thing that I wrote, I programmed that with the same underlying mechanism, using the same the data format that graphical user interface constructs. But it's certainly something that people have a lot of interest in being able to pursue and improve in the future.
Yeah, but Michael, Reality Composer is only available inside Xcode, right?
No, I mean, you have to download Xcode, but it's not it's a standalone application just for making stuff. So it comes as a package with Xcode, but it's not obligatory to use it to do coding with it. You can build things that are independent of having to compile projects and files and app stores and stuff like that. You can distribute USDT.
Okay, that's interesting. That's obviously 3D based. But it is a bit baffling, and I think we need to think about how we want to go forward with this because, you know, I am mad about metadata these days. So the question is the authoring system, going back to Macromedia Director and, you know, Go Live and all these wonderful things. They either author to their own thing or they author to another open thing. And if they author to an open thing, if the metadata is there, then many different applications can be decided for how the interaction should happen. So I think that's kind of interesting. But I think we can, Mark, please.
I just quickly say, I mean, one place that those well, they're not specifically apps, but I mean, I think there are lots of things happening around hypertext and knowledge tools and something where essentially you're working in a sort of rendered space. Whether you're turning it into formal HTML pages or not is almost neither here nor there. Whether it's doing quite the same UI type interaction as something like HyperCard does is a different thing. But I think there's plenty of sort of writing going on in that modular form, and where people are actually giving quite a lot of thought to supporting metadata that enriches the various views. It's not particularly bundled up as an app that screams at you. This is, you know, in the way that HyperCard is for making HyperCard stacks.
Yeah, so, okay. I was going to wait until Dini joined us, but she's had a heavy weekend, so she may not. In the discussion, Mark, you have often said, to your credit, that documents today are basically modeled on paper. You know, we need to go beyond that. And of course, we all agree. And what does that mean? And then this weekend, I realized that the notion of electronic literature really comes into this because, and it wasn't actually through Dini's work or the ELO, it actually came up when looking at different levels of digital, and there was an archival company who said that a digital document can just be a scanned PDF with no inherent interactivity. But electronic literature is kind of born native digital. So that becomes a very interesting component on that. So that's why also with a slight bit of rewriting I have to do for my thesis, I'm basically saying, can we make academic literature become electronic literature to enable these hypertextual affordances? And the hypertextual stuff can only happen if you have the right data. So that was kind of fun. I'm looking at the sidebar here. Of course, we should be using Slack, but fair enough. There's a lot of stuff about WebXR and yeah, I'm just looking at your comments. Right. Alan, would you like to present or rather introduce yourself? Maybe we should just briefly, everyone else introduce themselves so you know who you're talking to.
Sure, no problem. My pleasure. On my side, we are working with since a long time, a few years, about a product that is focusing on the knowledge. And my background is software developer since about 40 years. Not a developer, but a part of a company that I found in the US about 40 years ago, where we create what we called at that time groupware, if you remember that. And this, we have released some software called Think and Time, Marco Polo, document management, markup also at that time, but the market for Macintosh was very, very small. And then we moved to different market from Windows, and now we are leading in the education market. We have developed a CMS for a university, where the company Modern Campus is now the full leader in the US and also in Canada. I have a good background at tech market, and this my idea, since I'm going old, was to really create something that is that I feel really good about document management, but also knowledge management, learning tools, and so on. And as I started 2 years ago a software with a partner called SkillPass, where we were really focused on the knowledge for transmitting knowledge inside company. The software, the application was called SkillPass. But since the market is really red ocean with the COVID, we moved to something that is now called Quincy. And Quincy, it's something that is like aggregation of all my, let's say, understanding of what is good for transmitting knowledge and inside company, but also in groups. And the idea is to create something that help people to structure their content, but also to try to keep the context of their content. And that's the idea of Quincy. If you don't mind, I can also make a quick demonstration of the software for the application. So I have already the word software in mind. But the point is, we are now in beta. The application is working. It's really, let's say, not a. It's a lot of feature inside the application. Just from the authoring tool, that was the background of the learning tool that we have created in the past, to something now it's more to a shareable content. So we went to the idea of sharing content between members in the groups, and also share to web and so on. But the point with Quincy is the idea is to mix all kind of file type inside one player, let's say one organizer, where you bring Excel, Word, PDF, text, image, video, embed file, everything in one place, and you structure your document like you can do with folders. And you can also add some comments inside the structure to help the user, the attendant, and also or the recipient to understand what you want to share and let them comment if it's necessary to do. The first point, sharing. Well, let's say you create your content, you organize your content in a kind of what we call smart file, kind of shareable folder, where you structure as an author your content and you share this content to your audience or for yourself. And the idea is to let the user and or the recipient understand what you want to share. The idea is to help user not to go to a Dropbox folder or a Google Drive folder, but the idea is to keep the same structure that you have created and you share this structure to your recipient. And on their side, they have no need to have any application because everything is visible. It's what you see, what you get, or what you send, it's what you get. So the idea is to say with the new generation, the user doesn't understand what is a folder generally. Also, they don't want to play with a lot of application. The idea is to have a meta player where the user can really read everything that was sent by the author. And when we have not yet the file format for display, we plan to have this. The idea is we have the kernel, we have the core, and the idea is to let now the user understand what we have in mind, because it's when my partner in the US, it's really a real perceptual tool, and we want something very practical. And we are now going to something that helps the user to share the content. Is this we like to simplify the interface and make it smooth, intuitive, let's say powerful, and we plan to have intelligence, or let's say smart or intelligent inside Quincy in the next few months when we have really established the foundation of the application with the user. But that's the idea of Quincy. I'm following a lot of work in the future of works, but also I'm, let's say, a son of Ted Nelson, Engelbart. And in Belgium, we have Paul Otley. That was also someone that was really involved in the way to access to the information or document. This I have a long path in this content because I like this matter. Voilà, that's the idea. If you want, I can share a few minutes, and you have access also. If you want to have access to the application, it will be my pleasure to let you in. Do I go to the screen, Frode?
You should be able to share screen, yeah.
Okay. Let me, because I'm not working a lot with Partage d'écran. You have my screen on your side?
Yeah, yeah.
This you have something that have a notification. This inbox and outbox. Unbox is update at this moment. This is hidden, but the idea is you can have inbox for this. The user can bring some smart file, or you can also share page like you do with Notion. And if you go to something like this one, you click it, you have something that helps you to understand that it's a kind of Spotify look and feel. And the idea is that's something that was shared with my friend William. And I can co-edit this. I have two co-editor here. I have 10 items. It's 2 megabytes long. And I can also view, I have this content view with different ways. So you have card view, and you have also the idea of screenshot and content. That's the idea. And you have also the ability to have kind of a presentation, and you have a player like you do with PowerPoint or any presentation tool. This you have four ways to view your content. That's the inbox. You have the board. That means if you want to organize your tool and you have column like Kanban, and you can create your own column and you can follow the content that you receive in the way you want to track them or follow them or approve them. Smart file, it's I will create one for you in a few minutes, but the idea is you have a smart file that you shared. That's the one. Sorry, this version is my test version. Don't use if you have the URL. That's internal use. Sorry, but don't play with this. But that's for having a lot of content I want to share on my development version. It's also a smart file that was shared to me, and I can also follow the user if he has read 5 items on the 21, and if you have a check mark, that means he has read all the content, and you can also use the favorite if you want. Library, we have an internal KPM of a KPM inside Quincy. That's where you have page, like you have in Notion. So if I go to the page, I can play with this one. You can edit, and you have a tool, let's say a subset of Notion. That's if I create one, that's I say new page, title. And you have block mine. That means you can always add some stuff. You can also go to your library, and if you want to add some content from this library, you do it like this. This file type is not supported. Sorry. You can create easy page. You can, as you do with Notion, you can make a title. You have all the paragraphs, the normal tools like you have with Medium. The same idea is included inside Quincy. That means you can create your own content if you want. The library, you have slides. That means that will be freeform, like Hyperkite. The idea is to have freeform modules and text and create your own slide and make link with different slide or different page or different item that you want to share. This could be Excel file, whatever. So it's not yet done. It's a development right now. You have component. A component is, let's say, if you have several text or content that you want to mix, that means video with text with PDF, you can create a component that will be stored as an entity, and this entity can be added to any page. And the idea is how to do that. To see if I want to do that like this, I can. Sorry, I can select this one. It's not working. I don't know how it works. Yes, voilà. The idea is you can create a component, but normally you can add different content, but I don't know what is. Sometimes that's the kind of stuff. But the idea is you can create a component, and this component can be added to any page. And if you have add this component in several pages, it will also give you the connection between all the page and the component you have add in your page. There's the idea, you change the component and it will be spread in all the page and also in all the smart files that contain page and so on. So it's completely nested. Okay, you can add and manage all your PDF if you want. Media, you have audio, video, image, embed file also. That's also a link if you want to add some URL from this. Here you have URL and you have embed file. And files, that means could be Word, Excel, but we will add some other formats also from Adobe because people expect some Adobe tools feature. Here you can create channel like you do with, but I will show you how it's organized. There's inside a channel, I create my member. There's you click here for member info. That's also all the information about your channel, and then you can easily open each one, and each time this one there are nothing, sorry, Does you have an item here, this 16 in this case. You can also add to your favorite. You can see detail. That means all some metadata from from each smart file, but it's the same thing for any item that you have inside your library. So if you go to library, if I go to page, I can select this. I can view details, and you can see that this page is used in several smart files. You have also, if I'm not going too fast, but if you go here, you have one. Sometimes in other place there are one also, but that means you know where this page is used in some of your smart file. What I can show
Great
you.
for my team,
Sorry?
Peter, you're not muted. That was funny.
And
Hot mic.
let me create one smart file that just to understand how it works. This, if I go to smart file, I say future of words, of word. And if I go there, I can show you that I have several kind of file type. I just selected this afternoon. I drag and drop. Was too fast. Sorry, it works not usually. It's easy to add. I can take this one. And what you can do is you can move this any place. If you want to do it on the card view, you have a preview. Just you move it where you want. If you want to add some text, say this is a comment. Wow, sorry that I make a mistake. I can also move this comment where I want. I can add I can create title and so on, just for making having good structure. And as a viewer, that's the idea how to work. The point is you drag and drop all your files, and you can reorganize them and create structure, and you can share this. The idea is if you can download it, you can share it, and you can share with to a channel with someone, and you can also add limits if you want the time limit. You can co-edit with some user. Just if I want to have this I share, I can share channel, share to web. You have a user, and if you want to have a user that can make additional comments, you can co-create a smart file and share to other like this. The idea is to really co-create, and you can drag and drop and from your own library as a recipient or a co-editor, and you enrich the smart file with your co-author. That's the idea. What I can show you more, I don't know why it's always coming to here. Well, that's about, let's say, the philosophy. The idea is to have a container that where you add content and you can restructure your content and you share your content. You can have a user adding some comment if you want, and the idea is to give to the user some, let's say, tools that is not explained here, but is easy to show. This, if I'm going here, edit, you can see that you can create comment, but you can also hide blocks. That means as an author, you can create your content, but you can also hide some part of your content, and you share only the content that you want to share with your user, but you can keep some internal notes inside your organizer by your authoring tool. What you can also do, and that will be the last feature. This, if I'm here, and I will take something from another the same. If I go to Nebula project, I can be here. That's the kind of stuff we exchange with my my friends. And if I want, sorry, it works here. You can add this content if the user has given access to this. You can, like Spotify, you can take part of his content and create a new smart file, or you can add the content to one of your smart files. The idea is to create kind of playlist. In fact, when we released the first version of Quincy, it was called playlist, and sometimes for me it's some difficult to use. But the idea is to have the same philosophy of that Spotify, that you take the content, part of the content, you can create a new content, and you can share this content with other users. And if you keep the link of the content, even if the original author changed something, it will spread all the change inside all the smart file that you have shared. Voilà. I don't know if you have any question, but that's quick.
I've got a bit of a cough, but I'd like to start off with, what is the technical side of this? What is the framework or wrapping? Is it proprietary, open, and what's it based on?
This is created with a normal framework, React, but behind it's a graph database, Neo4j database, with additional component that we have created for to make it smooth and easy to manage. But we have no idea at this stage if we have 100,000 users inside the Quincy, how will be the speed. That's the kind of stuff that we plan for next month, is to stress the database. But the architecture is mainly a graph database. Are you still there?
I think Frode may have stepped away from his thing. I've got a quick question. So, what's your notion? This seems to be following notions emergent at the moment of basically blocks. How do you define a block, other than technically? So in other words, to someone who isn't a programmer, what do you describe a block as?
Is that mean the kind of text behind it? It's part when the block is created, it's Markdown compatible, but we have found some limitation for some stuff. But we plan to be even more than Markdown. That means at least Markdown, but also to enrich depending on the version. But the idea is normally if you copy something from Markdown, even copy paste, it will be we keep the formatting of what was done. But we want to improve that also. But yes, it's Markdown.
Okay. One other quick one. While I'm here is so this inclusion into sort of smart documents. So effectively, you're transcluding content in the sort of in the Nelson sense, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yes, that's right. I have one of my friends is let's say someone that has worked a lot with some engineering in the US about transclusion and so on inside the graph database. But it's not as a purist, it's not really transclusion as is. But we want to improve that. But at this stage, we are learning. That means we want to have a foundation and have people like you or your team that help us to make it not only just conceptual, but also to be practical. And that's the point, because if you go to and strict to the theory, we have found difficulties. That's the reason we have spent a lot of time, because this interface evolved, and we try to make it and keep it simple. We want to make it powerful, but we know that if we want to make it, let's say, something for knowledge worker, it cannot be just for PhD. It must be someone easy to understand and to play with.
Thank you.
What is your primary use case, talking of which?
That's a good question. In fact, we have no persona. That's something that is difficult to explain, because we have something that is really rich, probably some say too complex for some usage, and so perhaps so powerful for some stuff. But the idea is to let the user share easily, like you do with WeTransfer, and at least you can do that. If you want to go a little bit further, you can, because if you want to cooperate and if you want to exchange with some members, could be supplier, could be customer, and you can easily manage. And we have several use cases. We have notaries, we have real estate company, we have insurance company that play with Quincy, because it's so easy for them to structure what they want to share, and have also their recipient adding some photos for insurance company, or sometimes it's easy for some people, for some employee and notaries, because when they have a lot of WeTransfer or Dropbox, they have no structure of what they receive, and they spend a lot of time to restructure or to rearrange. And with Quincy, you can easily, let's say, help the user to understand what you want to exchange, and that's the idea. And we want in the future, let's say, what we will work on. It's not only something that the author can reorganize and organize for their recipient, but we want also the recipient to add some comments that for him, and to store the context of what he has received. And the idea is like you do with any paper you receive, and you add in your binder, you have some post-it and so on, but something that enrich your original content, and that something that user ask or require. That means not only sending back and make comments to the author or to other members, but also keeping as a personal tool for them, and storing the whole binder, or let's say, a smart file with all the comments and notes that he has taken, and to keep the context. We want to improve also the date of let's say the dates. That means everything that you create in it with timeline, a smart file can be also viewed as a timeline in the future. I know you have something that is good for me to, let's say, I discovered a few weeks ago was a tapestry, and I think they have something in terms of philosophy, looking for something to, let's say, sharing content, but in this case you can do it with other members, because you can really group, you can cooperate with the user. And this, we want to have this idea of meta player, this trying to preview all the content that you have inside your library and share to your recipient, and not having them looking for something that, let's say, rendering the content. Quincy must do that. Thus, we have some work to do to improve and to add more file format, but the idea is to be beyond PDF, and having video, embed file, and everything, and also comments, and that will enrich what you share.
I have a question.
Sure.
First of all, thank you very much for this presentation. I think it looks very beautiful, and it also the interface, and it looks, like you said, Spotify. It gives me Spotify feelings. Spotify meets G Suite and Dropbox or G Drive. It's a nice mix of things. You mentioned notaries, and that made me think, because I'm really sensing a very fluid document ecosystem here, where documents documents automatically update themselves based on these blocks. And I was just wondering, what there must be something what notaries or lawyers don't like about fluid documents, and there must be something which they love about fluid documents. And I was wondering if you had some insights on that, in which cases fluidity is great, and in which cases fluidity is not so great.
When we listen to the user, they ask for having a lock. That means you can see here, you can lock and unlock a document. That means if you share a document, it cannot be downloaded. But screenshot can be done anyway. But that means the document cannot be modified by the recipient. If you don't lock the document, the recipient can make his document for him, but he can also fork the document to make it really for him, or he can keep the relation with the author. This it's part of the decision of the recipient to say, okay, if I have access, do I have to keep all the legacy, or even perhaps the relation with the author, or do I take this document because I will reinvent it, or I will take some snippets and recreate the content. Notaries, in fact, they don't play with deep feature with Quincy. What they use is the way to organize when they receive some stuff from real estate company. They can see the order with comments about document that was shared to them. And if they want to share with some of their user, and not all of them are using them because it's a beta version, because they are scared to use a beta version, they just test with some user. What they love is that they can share something that is not a folder with comments inside their Gmail or their email, where all the content are not fully structured. What they love is the way the user has to read it, and also to mix a Excel file or PDF file or a Word file if it's necessary. And the user can also download the Word file and can also play with it. We plan perhaps to integrate really Office inside Quincy, but it's not our focus right now. But the idea, the recipient can download, modify, and make a drag and drop back to the document to the notaries. We are listening. But it's not really deployed in, let's say, real work environment fully. That means some of their user are beta tester also, but we are listening. What we have as request is end-to-end encryption. That's some of the user expect. For any reason, they don't want to have some of their content inside the cloud, and they are scared. But we have designed Quincy to let the user create a local instance in the future. That's for company, for university, but also for user. It's not yet an application. When Quincy will be an app, it will be probably user also easy to create a local DB for the user.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Leon, you as well. Can you unshare your screen, please?
Sure. Voilà.
There we are. Yeah, it's definitely worth thinking about. Hang on, the screen got very reorganized. There you are. About how we put our information together, how we share it. It's been interesting. Alan, the first time I think I saw your work was 3 or 4 years ago now, depending on how we count.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to keep the dialogue going for sure. So today in general, what's the consensus in the group? Do you want to talk about XR text or other text or any specific feelings? Otherwise, we're going to talk about metadata. Gosh darn it. Okay, I'm going to talk about HTML then for a second, because in my personal world, there's Sloan and there's the thesis, and there's same issues but very different aspects. So it's messing with my head. But I wrote a little note on encodings, and it's interesting, and I really want to hear what you guys think. It's interesting to think about HTML as a format whereby everything is written in the document. .html, everything is there. Of course, you bring in images and stuff. That's not what I mean. However, it is explicitly written for the reader to render it in a specific way. That's a really powerful thing. If you look at an RTF, the RTF is very simple. This is bold and whatever. If you look at PDF, we know what a mess that is. At least it presents it visually, superficially, cleanly. But HTML is designed not to be read as is. Isn't that a phenomenally interesting philosophical position? It's defined to be rendered, even if you have the raw file. The browser wars would have very different ways to render different things. And what we're living with today are over a decade, well, decades of cultural agreement of how certain CSS and other stylings should be presented, isn't it? But please, I'm not sure who's the sound in the background, but please mute if you're not talking. And Leon, please unmute because you will be talking.
Yeah, this is a topic to my heart. I also noticed this weird jump between plain text, RTF, this rich text file, and suddenly HTML. Well, this is, of course, my small little brain and how I experienced this jump. Suddenly, we went from readable text to sort of unreadable text, surrounded by markup and magic symbols. So, in a way, this even RTF was still what you see is what you get, sort of. Like you can see it, you can read it, you can type it. But the moment we went to HTML, which was also great, don't get me wrong, we took a pretty big step. And I noticed this when I started to explore visual meta, which is based on BibTeX, and the whole philosophy behind BibTeX. And again, the same difference between, for example, BibTeX and JSON is that BibTeX you can sort of write. I can write it on a napkin, but I can't really. It's not really comfortable to go beyond that. Like the moment you start to write notes in JSON to people, then things go wrong pretty quickly when you think about parsability and all that stuff. So yeah, I think this was a very quick transition in just a couple of years, but I have a feeling that in those a couple of years, this step was so big that there might be a lot of stuff to discover inside that step, so to speak.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Randall.
Beyond merely being a document that defines its presentation, which is the case for PDF as well as to a lesser extent RTF as well, and things. Modern HTML is supposed to be responsive in that it's composed in a way that means that it has the ability to live on different screens of different sizes and across a range of capabilities. So we have media queries, They are primarily to say, if you have a monitor or a screen display above a certain perceptual size, then do this. And if you have it below a certain size, then do that. And for the most part, people just use that to say, this is what it should look like on phone. This is what it should look like on laptop, on Mac, and PC. But it's not unreasonable to also have other targets on there. Most people don't have a very good reason to have web pages run on a full watch, but you can, and you can use CSS media queries to make sure that to whatever extent there is information that is relevant to display there, you can do that. And you can have, if not the exact content, then the sort of conceptually correct experience of that content in there. But you know, the same should and will continue to be the case in visionOS. So if there are things that visionOS can do, not that it is a visionOS device, but that something that visionOS or you know, one of these can do. This is Quest 3 Vision Pro. Then tell the user, tell the document, and then we'll do whatever we want with it. So, you know, I am building the HTML model element. There are special characteristics of the model element that are only available and present on visionOS today. Hopefully Quest will follow it. And so it's not just the sort of, there's a document that tells you how to display. There's a document that tells you how the display should flex to the range of surfaces and the configuration of capabilities and preferences that a user has. And I will grant Leon that means that it can come at the cost of legibility to a certain extent. But I would also say that that's at some point level a function of the authorship of the document. If you actually delete the CSS file from apple.com, it turns into a surprisingly readable page. You just deleted it straight up. And that's because the styling is, the actual styling is rendered more complex for the benefit of making sure that the document reads correctly, for accessibility, and for sort of performance and legibility in a range of different contexts. But people have broken that very, very terribly over the years. So you know, that's a challenge, that like an ongoing challenge, is how do you make something that is still a document, is still a text document, but has the ability to look the best for the capabilities that are put on offer. But yeah, like I just wanted to add that this flexibility is an intrinsic component of it. It didn't come at the ground floor. CSS, the cascading style sheet sort of model, and beyond that into media queries for the sort of flexible constraint display, they came in like 2000 and 2010 respectively. But you know, if and where we have to add things to the idea of a document and of styling, which we almost certainly will have to in order to make these things spatial in the future, I believe that people will let me. So hopefully you can feel confident in that.
Thank you, Brundle. Mark?
Yeah, I think with something like HTML, part of the sort of unseen part of it is the semantics it puts in, which some of which is used to some which is obviously used to help with the rendering, but also just to give some prompts as to what's in there, so it might help with the way the remediation is done if you're putting it into a different format. I think the interesting transitional phase we're at is that we're sort of trying to make sense of the post-paper document in two different ways. One is which I was thinking as I was listening to Alan's presentation, because of course we can make all these wonderful fluid documents, and one of the or presentational systems, and one of the challenges we then have is, well, at what point how do I fix that without losing all the flexibility that's in it? So it works wonderfully while it's all flexible, and a challenge often comes with these things, or even with something like a Google Doc, how you record the important sort of waypoints as something more than just this edit on a continuum, because at the moment, too many things fall back to programming sort of nostrums that don't actually make sense to pretty much anyone but a programmer. And that's problematic at the moment. And that's why a lot of tools, I think, struggle, because the wider user base don't have any notion of forks and edits and all this kind of thing. They're more used to, they're probably still swimming in the world of documents, as you would think in a paper type. So there's no error in that. I think it's quite normal that we're going to see this as we transition through. But I do think having documents that record some of their structure are incredibly useful if you accept rather Brandal's brought up. You don't necessarily know where the render surface environment is going to be.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Any instant look, guys, just to make it simple, if anybody has an instant response to something someone says, just say so if it's brief, obviously. Peter.
Okay, before I leave, I just want to mention that it seems like we're getting a lot of interchangeable file formats now. We're having a proliferation of it. You have RTF, you have people who are using Word, then you throw it through Pandoc. Pandoc turns that into Markdown. You fiddle with the Markdown, throw it back through Pandoc, turn it into LaTeX text source. Then you run that through the typesetting system to get a final PDF if you really care about microtypography and you want that real fine-grained control. So what I think we should start to think about is maybe a meta document which consists of a whole bunch of potentially interchangeable formats. You can use the mathematics of lenses, which are bidirectional filters, so that you can edit in any one of the formats and automatically have that change get mirrored in all of the other formats. And on that note, Mom's ready for me to take her out for the day now, so I'm going to have to drop off. See you on Wednesday.
Thank you, Peter.
Bye-bye.
So just really briefly on what Peter said, one of the ideas discussed, of course, is to have an entire HTML version of a document encoded in Visual Meta in a PDF. I know it sounds horrendous, or at least the interactive elements should be able to. Visual Meta doesn't have to be BibTeX, if there's specific things. So then we have to ask ourselves, what should be interactive? Fabienne, sorry.
Yeah, another thing, I think, well, you know my bias for HTML, or at least the web. So I do think, yes, it comes at a cost, but in terms of responsiveness, and that also is not free. Like, in order to make responsive content, it is challenging to work from any kind of headset or laptop or phone or the form factors, and to keep it accessible. For example, if you cannot even read, then you must have the content to be semantically annotated. I mean, it's a proper challenge. And to also show the size of the challenge, and I already discussed with Leon about this a bit, but I'll share my screen briefly if I find the button. Yes.
No rush.
Please let me know when you can see it.
It says you've started. It hasn't come up yet. There it is.
Yeah, super. Thank you. So I have another headset, the Lynx. I think I maybe mentioned it a couple of times. And unfortunately, the browser in it doesn't support hand tracking. There was a bug. Basically, it got partly fixed, but nobody made built basically the browser for the Lynx headset. So I had to do it myself, which is actually not trivial. So just spoiler alert, it works. It's not perfect, but basically now I can manipulate content with my hands. But why do I mention all this? Is because it took about 50 gigabytes on my hard drive. Not any video, like there was no video, just code basically. So it shows a little bit. So voilà, that's the actual outcome. I have controllers as virtual hands, so it works. And I describe a bit the setup, but building a browser So that's how do you say? That's an immersive browser, but in practice, it's built. I would say I don't remember, but 98% at least is the normal browser. So based here on Gecko for Firefox, they're switching also to Chromium, the same way Chrome and Edge and other browsers are being built. And it's huge. I mean, 50 gigabytes of source code of text, basically, it's gigantic. Most of the time, when you build something, you have maybe 500 megabytes of source. And where does all this come from? It's the JavaScript engine, it's the CSS rules. And so it shows a little bit also to get all that responsiveness. And okay, yes, there is more. There is some networking, etc. But it's the complexity of the stack is huge, and most people can't even build like such a thing. It's yeah, it's both scary and exciting, and that's also why, to be honest, and I mentioned it also to Leon before. I was happy to be able to build that browser just because it feels like it is still a bit of a black box in terms of complexity, even though it's open source. But it feels still, despite all this, like tractable. So that if at some point I want to change some part of the browser itself, even though today I don't have the knowledge for it, I know that it can be done. It's not something that just sits there and you have to accept the way it is. So it's also, even if once want to change the browser to support something, say Visual Meta or another format, and that person is not Apple or Google or Meta, it is still also, despite the complexity, feasible.
That's just very, very Brendel. To write a browser, you guys are just geniuses beyond compare, both of you. So you wrote a browser, Fabien, for the headset. That's kind of amazing.
I did not. I just built it. Oh, wait, sorry. Built it in the technical sense of somebody wrote it, but between the step of going from that browser as text to an executable that the device can run, it's a series of steps, and I had to abstract away, like I mean, you don't want to know the detail, so I don't want to say it's trivial, but I also did not write it. What I did modify it a tiny bit, like the bare minimum, to show that, hey, I've wrote it, or I built it and modified it rather. But yeah, it's as if somebody took, I don't know, a book, and then they wrote their name on the back page and then they shared it. That's the amount of work in terms of creativity, or let's say. But then it's as if I printed the whole thing. I don't know. It's a little bit, the analogies are limited, but I did not write it. I will put the reference there in the chat, which does include the source code of the browser itself, and the people who wrote it also, like I was saying, they wrote maybe 2% of it, like 98% is from Gecko, from Firefox. And then people who built Gecko and Firefox, it's, I don't know how many dozens, hundreds of people over decades. It's a huge endeavor. So I did not write it. That being said, also, as I mentioned, I think here before, and to Leon, there is something called the browser book, which I browse through rather than read properly, which specifically is like, can you actually write a browser? And the argument there is, it's not that complicated if you don't bother with a huge amount of how do you say? Yeah, if you keep it minimalist, I'll say. If you just do the bare essential, then yeah, students can write browsers too if they want.
Fabien,
Yeah.
you sound like one of those people who was just served a really, really nice dinner, and we say thank you for cooking, and you go into half an hour of how some of the ingredients were pre-made. It's still an achievement, and there are many ways to argue this up and down. Hardly anybody writes assembly language anymore, so fair enough. So And here's the thing that I just want to bang on a little bit and see what the reaction is. So, um, and this comes back to my core value, of course, which is how to deal with the data slash metadata. In most systems, the thing you put into something determines what you get out of it. And I think that's quite limited. You know, HyperCard was great, but if you made a button on the left side with this view, the viewer would get a button on the left side with that view. What I'm trying to do with the approach of visual meta is say, here is stuff. Your reading software should be able to choose what to do with it. I happen to have an instantiation to prove the concept in Reader, of course. But I'm wondering, especially with HTML as a model, if we can think more about very, very open and discoverable ways to put more into our work that different systems can use. I mean, I would like author to be able to export documents and have someone else say reader is absolute rubbish. Considering the metadata, it should do this, that, and the other. That would be useful. Considering that web browsers today, you know, they all competed on trying to be the same in a sense. You know, I don't know of any web browsers that are, look, pages are displayed very differently on this web browser. We know what the underlying is, but the user community needs something else. So
Reader mode is
what's that?
Reader mode does not exist on Chrome. Reader mode?
Yeah, I'm familiar with reader mode, and that is useful. But when you're in reader mode, can you? I'm just hang on. I'm going to click on it now. Okay, so I'm gonna. It's been a while. How do I enter reader mode?
You click on the AA on the left side of a page that is documenting. So if you go to something on NY Times or something, then generally you'll have articles that look document-like enough that it'll allow you to enter reader mode view.
It's the left-hand end of the navigation bar in Safari. So just to the left of the URL.
Not for me now. I'm in edition.cnn. Looking at an article. New York Times. Let's have a look. Supreme Court rules Trump can remain on the ballot. Oh yeah, there's an icon there.
Oh, they have broken it. So news, one of the challenges, which is sort of central to this, so I am on that same article and it is not working for me. And it's likely because it is in an iframe. So one of the challenges is that, you know, news articles, news websites don't want you to use reader mode because it ruins their ad revenue. So I'm curious. I'll file a radar on this, but let's find another one then. Go news.google.com. One of the things that reader mode does is when it identifies, let's see if the CNN article is better for it. That's better. That's not as reader modey as I would have expected. Or maybe, so I use an internal version of macOS, an internal version of Safari, things like that. Not for any cool kids club reason, but because I'm responsible for the development of it. But reader mode is supposed to make a single column layout that has none of the advertising and has all of the figures and illustrations kind of displayed inline as close as they can kind of anticipate would be appropriate for it. And that's because sort of similar to what I was saying about responsive design and the fact that there's these well-established norms for being able to build, you know, Mac versus iPhone and, you know, Android and Windows and respectively as well. It has been by turns understood that you don't get to decide how things are going to display on people's devices. And so you've got to make decisions about what's appropriate to do on that basis, you know. So you really like the sort of surveillance advertising models that we have today where they need to ensure that the ad was on screen and you know, if they had their way, they would want to make sure that there were eyes on the screen, eyeballs on it, that kind of thing. Is somewhat at odds with the infrastructure of the web, and so there are deep challenges there. But yeah, so like, but the basic premise of a web service like that is that they should be relatively open, and so that's where scraping, becomes not just possible but very, very difficult for people to remove the capacity for. Not that it stops people from trying. Scraping is the process of having an automated browser, a script-based thing that is sort of pretending enough to look like it's a real thing to be able to make inferences and determinations about web page content. And we like some scrapers, we call them crawlers. They're the things that are responsible for making search engines work as they do today. But we don't want scrapers that are sort of pulling all of the data off of Reddit unauthorized in order to trade the large language model. We only want to do that to paying customers. So not we. I'm not representing Apple. That's not. I don't. That's the joke.
No, absolutely.
But it's also true. So that's a sad one. But yeah. So like that. That is a sort of a balance of capabilities and concerns that sort of come out of the substrate, the metaphors of the web. What's funny is that while we sort of understand at some level what the web is, because we've all spent so many years, some of us decades on it now, the underpinnings of it are relatively elusive for a proper intellectual understanding of it. And what the practical consequences of those are. It's not simply that people, they don't understand what a car is. Like, there's very little benefit you get while driving a car to know exactly what the carburetor is doing, that kind of thing. But when you know what the web is, then you can envision some genuine alternatives and opportunities as a consequence. So thank you for entertaining the diatribe.
Well, Fred stepped away. It's interesting that, well, I'll pick up a point he made, which was, we're talking about the visual meta. I mean, in a way, you're talking about a visual sort of CSS, because essentially CSS was, and I remember it when it first arrived, it was marvelous. You won't have to write font tags everywhere, and it was something that allowed some flexibility. But the point that made me set my hand up earlier was I was thinking, hearing discussion of sort of things like rich text, and I'm thinking how little time we've actually had it, because rich text sort of happened in my working life. I think, I mean, before you used to type stuff, you went to the typing pool and they underlined it, or you were sent off the typesetter. So we have almost a sense of several decades of working with Word have perverted our sense of our understanding of document and typesetting and stuff. And when that's not a jibe against sort of real design and typesetting, as in a nice book, but just the quotidian stuff that we push out. I someone asked me to write something in Word the other day. I just gave up. I just had to use something else. It was so horrible, flashing things on and off and telling me I was doing the wrong thing. It wouldn't let me write.
Use author.
No. I find I have trouble with author, so I actually wrote it in. Well, I wrote it in BB Edit and in Tinderbox because I just find it easier to write in plain text and use HTML, because then I control the markup. And if I want it to be bold, I'll put bloody bold tags in. Thank you very much. I mean, because a lot of things. I find, funnily enough, I find myself, in terms of trying to write meaningful documents, moving away from WYSIWYG, because most of the time I'm writing for somebody else. So my intent is clarity for the reader, not what I want as a designer, in a sense. I'm not really interested. I'm not invested in the design. I'm interested in the clarity to the reader. And the readers are often quite different. So I'm never
is that contradictory,
the same set of readers. And that's been an interesting thing that's just come over time in practice. I didn't think about it, but I reflect on it now. That's definitely part of my writing approach, and which is why I've gone back to much more bare bones writing. So I write the text I mean to write. I write minimal styling text, and one of the most useful ways of doing it is, there are various ways, but they're all sort of along the lines of marked up text. So I don't really want to write in a rich text environment, because I just find it gets in the way now.
On that point, Mark, having bold text be bold, italic text be italic, how does that get in the way for you?
It was when I was writing Word, and it kept wanting to had all sorts of bizarre notions of what was good grammar. Well, maybe not in the country I'm in, but so there are all sorts of defaults were getting in the way, and it wanted to change things, and
I'm not talking about the
was
rest.
wanting to restyle, and I was thinking, I don't tend to use a lot of styling, except at an output. I don't really think about the styling until I want to go and output the document. I tend to use it goes back to I think back to the early HTML markup when we had emphasis was bold, but italic took over from the EM tag, which I think was the intent, because the idea is that you were using this a semantic meaning. So you were emphasizing something to make the point that it just, it needed to be clearer to the reader than the main text. And somewhere along the way of writing in WYSIWYG
editors.
I think we've rather lost sight of that, and it's just become a push button. It's become a push button laziness rather than think, okay, no, this needs to stand out, or this needs to be in a slightly different typeface because I need to indicate that this is a piece of actual code that you type, or this particular character absolutely needs to be rendered like this and not like something else. But otherwise, I find most of it's fluff.
But so, for instance, in author, what would be the thing that would get in the way of you just writing?
The only reason actually I struggle with author is just because it's obviously very attuned to you. I just find all the way I'm used to doing things is so things like adding a link. I want to write something and then turn into a link, but the application wants me to say I'm going to write a link and do it. It's very minor things, but it just creates massive friction.
Mark, if you write a link in author, it becomes a link.
Yeah, yes, but I don't like that. I will want to decide. I actually want to do that because I tend to write quite complicated sort of technical English, where these affordances, if I'm writing letters to the council or something, are fine. If I'm writing very deliberate stuff, I don't actually want the editor trying to second guess what I mean, because I spend my entire life going back having to undo it.
So let
me finish a second. It's not a critique of the tool. It's what you're trying to write. And I would admit that the writing I tend to do is probably complex in it tends to have a lot of quite structured language that needs to be carefully nurtured in it, which is admittedly not what probably most people are writing.
So do you mean that you find it annoying that it underlines a link? Is that what you mean?
No, it's hard to say. I just find it hard to use because it doesn't work how I sort of expect a rich text writing tool to work. And that's not a critique. It's just that it doesn't work how I expect it to work. I can't put it more plainly than that. I mean, I haven't kept lots of bullet points or something, but I just find after sort of 15 minutes, I just have to go and use something else. And then it's easy, and then I just copy and paste it back, and if necessary, then I'll go through and redo the formatting, which is quicker for me to do.
No, I understand that. I just find it fascinating and interesting because when you write in author, you cannot change the font. So a lot of those things, and it doesn't try to format things for you. So I found it interesting that you found that it does too much. And the example,
okay. So the thing is, I find it really, really hard the way it insets the headings, because it just having the body text sit to the left of, I just find it odd. So I'd rather not see it because it disturbs my flow when I'm writing. So it's much easier to not have all this styling on, because it's not actually helpful to the work, if you see what I mean, to the writing you're doing, because the intent is to have your mind in what you're doing. If you're fighting the formatting the whole time, because whether it doesn't matter why, but if it's drawing your mind away from the actual act of writing meaningful text for another person, which is why I find myself getting back to writing at the plainest sort of text, which wouldn't have been my expectation, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I know you don't want the indenting, so we've actually removed that on export. You can turn it on and off depending on what you want. But it's very interesting how we view formatting differently. So you feel that in BBEdit or something, if you write like this is bold and then you write the word and then bold, it has less friction for you than making the word bold. So no, that's cool.
Often I won't add that till the end anyway. I mean, as time goes by, it's almost easier to go and actually gloss the style on when you're done. the WYSIWYG method has taught us that what we do is we go along, we make it look pretty as we go, which is actually incredibly inefficient way, I think, of actually writing.
Hang on. This is a very important point in our community, because you're using the word pretty and you're using the word WYSIWYG. WYSIWYG, of course, was applicable to printing. But I would say that what we have now, not WYSIWYG, it's what you see is what it is. You know, so we could call it rich text. That would be more appropriate, because
but it's the same. It's the same thing. I mean, in the sense
it's not the same thing, in the sense that when you are writing, some things you just want to write as a big block of text, absolutely, and sometimes you want to change it for yourself or the reader in some way, but that's not for the export. But there is, you know, Bob Horn and James and Jim, they talk about really wanting a huge amount of formatting, which goes even further than I want, you know, like a huge thing. So that it's an important range of mentalities we need to consider. Randall, I think you had your hand up a long time ago.
Yeah, I put it down because I wasn't sure. I didn't totally lose the thread, but what I was going to say there was about the ability to simply not display some things depending on the capabilities of a device. So in the same way that visual meta has the ability to be printed, there are media queries for print, technically, so that you can have a fundamentally different document, which, you know, the grain of the web is that it should be philosophically the same document, but if you have a particular point of view about what you want to be committed to physical and durable media, then you could print out your meta information, your visual meta within that, and merely use it within the context of a live rendered browser. So that I think is interesting. I mean, to weigh in between the two of you on the other subject of, you know, what is formatting. I do a lot of stuff through bullet points and outline hierarchies. And so I do need to have type styles of heading level 1, heading level 2, and tabbed in bullet orders in order to make sure that I am covering points. You know, so at some point, hopefully, we will get the release notes for Safari 17.4 out. They might be out today, I'm not sure. But we also have a more through-going explanation of what transient track pointer input is that we need to have for WebXR. And, you know, what my writing is best when I sort of cover the bases, when I figure out what has to go into each piece, and then I will flesh it out. So to that end, it's useful to have formatting, but at the same time, that's actually kind of a false work. It's something that goes up over a paragraph, but is not constitutive of any of the parts of the paragraph. And so there are some interesting challenges and tensions there between what I want in terms of having formatting for the purposes and benefit of being able to kind of enunciate the scale and hierarchy of that stuff. But at the same time, I'm somewhat in Mark's camp in that I don't want formatting on the prose that gets kind of constructed afterward. And if anything, that actually makes my ideal text editing platform even more complicated, because I want to have text that I don't want. So I don't know where that puts us.
Well, many things that we keep going back to is different levels of reading something, and also different level of authoring. You know, you might author for someone young, someone in your field, and all of that stuff. But of course, that takes work, and it's not often done. But if we look at a simple example of references, now, I don't know why references are handled so badly by publishers. It may be that they don't want you to look at other documents. I don't know what it is, but if we just take the notion of a reference section in either HTML or a PDF, specifically PDF, currently is essentially dumb data. It isn't something that can easily automatically be parsed, right? So I think it's a good example to look at the notion of including metadata that was there in the manuscript anyway, and then have the reader software decide what to do with it. Because otherwise it can get a bit vague or yeah. So for instance, when you download a PDF document and you're reading it, two things. Number one, you can't easily programmatically see what the sources are, but also, as we've discussed in our Wednesday meetings, it might be useful to include more information than that's what is available in a normal academic document. For instance, the link type. Why is this being referenced? Maybe a note from the author saying, this is particularly interesting, and so on. So when I'm talking about having stuff in the work and the different software reads it in different ways, that's kind of what I mean. That kind of thing. Yeah, Mark.
There's an interesting, just thinking your last point about the thing about link types. I had an interesting conversation actually with Dave Mellard the other day, which led us back into the subject. But he made the point quite fairly. He said, well, arguably, the context of the reference is made by the context of the writing. And I thought, well, yes and no, because I think as we're showing in the experiments we're doing with the XR and things, there's a bit more to it than that. It's probably true while it's in the realm of paper or something that's pretending to be paper, but certainly in a sense, in a plastic, if I can call it that, environment in something like XR, there's no requirement to stick within those conventions, and so actually having the information is useful. Problematic though is that we'll say something like, well, the author will indicate what their intent is, but we've been through 20 or 30 years of this whole debate between the author's view and the reader's view. So it's of course it turns out to be a little more complicated. The reality, I think, is somewhere in the middle, that rather than forcing everything to have necessarily extra information, I think if the tools or the methods we use allow for glossing where it might be useful to the reader, makes sense. Otherwise, you fall into the bear trap of having a fixed system and wasting time trying to work out, which box you're going to tick before you're allowed to enter this bit of text into the flow.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm talking about is including that, Mark, because there's no reason why a document, a manuscript, cannot find the sentence that referred to the citation and add it to the citation at the back of the document. We have looked at ways of clicking on the references, the number, and it shows where it is in the document. But what I'm really trying to advocate here and get more dialogue on is the notion of, quite simply, stuffing as much as you possibly can into an extremely open way in a document, and then having different ways to read it. If this is PDF with visual meta, or if it's HTML or whatever, I don't really care that much. But I do care about things being very closed. I mean, we had just the fact that we had image maps and they're all gone. The average user cannot make an image map anymore. That's absolutely craziness, right? And it was
so image map was a solution to a problem. We can do SVG, and arguably SVG is doing a better job of conveying the contents.
But there's no authoring systems for it.
SVG, there's Inkscape.
What's that?
Illustrator.
Yeah,
I mean,
how much do you spend per month on Illustrator, right?
If you play with Figma, you can have also SVG working for that. And in our mind, we think that Quincy could be a Figma for document, because everything is also managed with SVG if we want. And on my side, I prefer to be focused on how to manipulate and how to handle text and formatting myself, and being helped by or sustained by some intelligence to help me to format. Today you have to format and then express. And I think in the future that will be a more free form, where it will be easy to create some snippet and some text and so on, and ask the intelligence to reformat your text and make suggestions. And I think SVG will help to also create big titles, and you just expand your titles. And if you want to be really coded with your own pattern, you will be able to use kind of fonts and kind of format, and you can have some, let's say, something personalized, and you play with that. And if you want to increase, the tool will help you to go to other kind of format, but you can also play with your own format. And if you try to write something, you know, when you start with a word processor, you have to start on the beginning. That's strange. You have to to directly type where you want in the page. You have to define the size of your page, the way to want to express your ID. And then if you want to make a good read-only stuff, the intelligence must reformat for you, and we have to create some template to reverse, and not on the beginning. That's the kind of thing I will be probably helpful for the author, but also for the recipient, for the reader. I think he can receive some text and some content and organize the way the author has done, but after he can remix the way he wants to view and read and keep the information. And I think for me, format cannot be a constraint. Any format must be free form and help the user to create the way he wants the document and want to keep the document. But format cannot be, for me, a constraint. And if you look for some kind of format, it's difficult. But SVG, I think, could be a good path for manipulating objects. And I think document is more object than just type of let's say type of object. Is it must be a general and let the user play the way you want, and after he can, if he wants to convert, okay, it will convert. I don't know if I will explain my idea, but I think going to a format will be for more constraint, but going to the way the user wants to have the document shared, or the way he wants to keep the document as a reader. And after, if he wants to go to the original document, he has the two versions. And also for me, just to explain that the component must be far more intelligent than today. You know, when you share a document, it's sometimes some document has relate or connection with other documents, and document can be content. And if you want to select one part of the document or one part of the content, and you explain the meta and also the origin of any content, I think you must be able to bring not only the text, but also some connection that are behind some content. And we always think about part of and snippet and something that is part of a whole. But I think the value of text, value of content, and value of context means that you must keep some link between some item of content. And when you want to manipulate something, you must make some link with your real content, your own library, but also with some connection you have create, even if for you or from the author. This it's not just let's say computing. It must be intelligent behind any kind of content. That's, I think, for me, the future of creating document, sharing document, and let the user manipulate the content without being constrained by the format. Yes, it's semantic.
Yeah, I'm also noting Mark's comment here about aesthetics. I don't see it as aesthetic, what our discussion is at all. And I'm not going to try to sell you on author, but to tell you a design thing of author is that you, the user, you can set the typeface for the headings and for the body text, and that will apply on that computer for any document you open. So the user controls the aesthetic for themselves, absolutely. But that's all it is. You know, you can't do any aesthetics while you're writing, you can bold to highlight, you can italic. That's about it. There's hardly anything else you can control, because I agree that it can very, very quickly become an issue of just fiddling with fonts, as we put it. You know, moving it over there, moving it over there. So I completely agree with that. So while you're writing, you don't want to just write one continuous massive block of text, of course. You will want to have different breaks. And of course, there are many different ways to do that. But I do think it relates to the author's semantic intents of how to go through the document. And as you're talking about, Alan, with the linking, you know, that's a huge topic here of linking both with web links and also the names of documents. I find having the names be very useful. But a lot of this comes down to, you know, I'm author and reader are quite successful. You know, I get emails from people saying they want this and they're happy, and sales are fine. But it doesn't suit everybody, as we just looked at, you know, with Mark and me, and that's absolutely fine. But we really need, I think, as a community, to work towards a way where any one of us can really write a writing system. Anyone else can really write a reading system. And there is enough richness and robustness and open standardness in the thing what we write that it'll just work. You know, maybe HTML can work for this as well. You know, unfortunately, it's not really used in academia now. That's a bit of a stumbling block, but it is bizarre. And when we look at things like EPUB, it doesn't seem to be rich enough to have the answer. But at least, you know, from the stuff we're talking about on Wednesdays, at least we should be able to see what a document connects to and what connects to it, right?
Yeah. Well, so I think at this point, for better or worse, trivially, like if somebody has the ability to write a reader or a writing app, by definition, effectively, it will be able to be done in HTML. Plus, you know, some non-trivial quantity of JavaScript. That's just like the feature parity that's available for. It means that anything you can do, unless there are really clear sort of system limitations and capabilities that you must lean on, like being able to trigger multiple cameras simultaneously, that kind of thing, then you should be able to do it over the web. And moreover, like if there are any requirements to do that kind of thing for any enduring sort of duration for people, then it's not impossible for those to be sort of jammed into the web to respond to demand. Go ahead.
Yeah, we can kind of do that, but with the example of a reference section, there doesn't seem to be standards, even in HTML, that says this is a reference section.
No, and so yeah, exactly. Like, unfortunately, that why I said trivial is because that's neither here nor there with regard to what that thing is or what sort of priorities philosophically that tool, web-based or not, actually has. For better or worse, the web is such a flexible platform that it doesn't really provide an intrinsic sort of necessitation of certain priorities at this point. You know, Google has built innumerable, like, very clever but fundamentally web-breaking ways of doing the web. The Google Web Toolkit being one of the most interesting and important. But you know, I'm not a fan of React for some fairly significant reasons in that regard as well. Like, it is not the web; it's something else that is built on top of it. And there are benefits, but there are costs. So yeah. One of the things that I don't know that it necessarily needs to be a goal of everybody to be able to write a writer and write a reader right now, is because I want to change what writing and reading is, and I don't know that that everybody can start that. I think that there are some very fundamental things that happen, particularly as a consequence of doing things like substantial reading in Vision Pro, that just make me want to do different things that haven't been picked up yet. So like, I've been continuing to read Marshall McLuhan, Understanding Media, in Vision Pro, sitting on the sofa back there with, you know, the screen pitched up like that and kind of looking like I'm dead for 3 hours at a time every night. And it's amazing. But there are some really interesting things, really interesting provocations that come to mind as a consequence of doing that. Like, I would love to, for example, annotate in a social way, and you know, Amazon Kindle and read.amazon fragments.com allow me to make notations that contribute in some diffuse way to, like, lots of people highlighted this part, so maybe you want to feel clever about it too. But something else that would be pretty awesome is to actually leave bookmarks in there to say, like, if anybody wants to talk about this, then maybe let me know and we can actually literally chat. You know, the idea of having an intrinsic social first kind of mechanism. And if it's social first and spatial, then that makes some really incredible sort of opportunities. And like I was saying last Wednesday, being able to build a substrate upon which people can actually have a trusted network of annotations that can live in situ would be something that could not just transform something like Wikipedia is that, but if you built academia that way, then people could write papers that literally were annotations of other papers, and it wouldn't be, you know, on the the onus wouldn't necessarily be on the reader of both papers to do that reconciliation between them. You know, you could publish an annotation, and that would just go over as a slip on the originating paper. And if, you know, if the real estate doesn't permit, then you can revise and rearrange it. But what you have is a literally derivative work, something that but yeah, like that model, you know, requires a lot of trust and copyright negotiations, things like that. But that would change reading, along with the proper integration of audiovisual sort of capabilities. And I don't think that stops being text simply because it's not exclusively glyphs. I know we sometimes disagree on that, but I think that there are, even if that isn't text, I think it's worthy, and I think it's worth thinking about the practical consequences of. So with all of that in mind, like, one of my worries is that, like, I think people will be able to participate in that soon, but I think that there are some fundamental groundwork in infrastructural things that need to be done to the basic concept of reading and writing in books that we have to do first in order to render those artifacts imaginable to the rest of the public.
That was a wonderful speech, and now I'm going to go flying into it. Headwind. Yeah, okay. So, pardon my French, people are listening, but not French. Pardon my bad language. Let's fucking solve this, right? I think we can, because forget BibTeX and HTML as being an either or. Let's just do two things in this community, and I put a note here so I don't forget myself. One of them can be, we define what a reference section can look like, right? And again, if it's an HTML or BibTeX, or if it's written in Urdu, I don't give a monkeys, right? But we say author first name equals, or just author name. This is stuff that Mark and I have gone through for years, right? But we can also have lots and lots of exciting alternative field. Link type equals. If it's empty, who cares? Ignore it, right? It can be sentence it is found as in the document if the authoring system can automatically put it in. All of that stuff can go in. And the only reason it doesn't exist is because it hasn't been built and implemented. If it's built and implemented in more than 2 or 3 systems, it can extract this stuff. It's a standard. It may not be an immediate worldwide hit, but it is a standard. And similarly, on our Wednesday talks, one of the things we've gotten to the point of saying, and I'm using the term library extremely liberally, imagine having a document where the only thing you care about is the reference section. Everything else is irrelevant. That's just a library. That gets really close, Brandl, to what you're talking about, a list of glosses. Right? There's nothing wrong with that. That is very, very important. You know, if you look at the history of books, writing, printing, and some of the earliest books printed were basically that. They were glosses. That was all it was. So if we do a little bit of linking, a little bit of connection, but if we just implement this, I will implement it in Visual Meta. But in Visual Meta, it can be anything, right? Let's say Fabian says that's nonsense and he wants it in HTML. That's fine. I'll just write the HTML inside Visual Meta. Right? That's how I've stolen it. And then the software can extract it. So I really want to hear more about just doing this stuff. Leon, solve all my problems, please.
So yeah, I am one of these people who is just fucking doing it. The problem is that I get cricket sound, or the sounds of crickets here, and I will show you what like. For example, I'm adding, or I have added descriptive metadata in my XR fragment spec, which basically means if I have a 3D scene, then it will scan. It will say, let's do this. Let's just scan for
Leon,
the.
because it's so important what you're doing, can I ask you a clarifying question?
Yeah.
In a sense, would it make sense to think 3D first, so XR fragments first, and then other stuff is just like a shadow of that rather than the other way around, maybe? Is that what you're thinking by saying XR fragments being important?
Well, I don't even know that. What I'm.
So sorry for the
it's
diversion.
such a big space. So I just see like this world of descriptive metadata, and the moment if I raise my fingers, there's like thousands of people who are going to say like, no, we talked for years about this. Go to the RDF guys or go to the BibTeX guys, or if you don't like those, then you have to go to the Dublin core guys, or maybe just go to the area guy. So anyways, I talked with a lot of people. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna sort of poly adopt all of these things, Dublin core, Open Graph, and so I'm now scanning for the let's say SPDX header. What kind of license is on this document? Or creator, Dublin core. Then we have OG title, Open Graph, which is also supported in DC. And we have, well, basically every standard has some different unique ones. There is some overlap. But yeah, so my point is a bit like, I'm doing this, but I have a feeling that anybody who says, let's fucking do this, like me or you, like we get cricket sounds because it's such a loaded environment that I feel like you almost have to go full activist mode to really pull something off. And I'm not really an activist. I'm just making something which I think is useful, and I'm just poly adopting all the most popular specs. And to make it even more complex, I even noticed that the RDF movement actually started out as a sort of poly metadata kind of, they had this polyglot vision, and now they decided to no longer do this and sort of like rule out some older ones. So that also scared me. I'm scared, Frode.
Come to London. We will do another barbecue. My hair, by the way, is finally grown back. I just want to show you that Mark has written on this, and I completely agree with him. And also, before I give the mic over to Mark, on our Sloan work, we are making this stated assumption that the metadata for the documents is perfect. So obviously we're faking it, right? But none of it is magic thinking. All of it is the reasonable expectations that document can be proper, full electronic literature document and not just faux paper, right? So as part of that dialogue, and it doesn't even mean you guys have to be there on Wednesdays, this is important. And I would love to try to work with you, Leon, on incorporating some of this into author, seeing if that works, and then see if we can get into the reader. But also it would be great if, for example, Fabienne, with your HTML world, if we can look at a way that whatever we put into our horrible system could easily be opened up to what you're doing. We could very happily put HTML stuff in there too. Find a way to render that in your world. It has to be bigger than just A to B. Mark.
Yeah, I was going to just loop back around because your passing comment earlier was saying, well, EPUBs don't really work, but I think that's only because EPUBs aren't really finished. I mean, I spent some while on those when I was making the ones at Ted Nelson's work. And the things you trip over are things like, it's the unfinished business. So no one's really thought about what do you do with footnotes? Or where do the end notes go? Do they go to the end of the page? Do they go into a separate article? Do they go a separate document? I think these things are fixable. It's just there doesn't seem to be. Maybe there just isn't the caucus that's having the conversation about that. And I suspect the publishing world are all sitting back hoping somebody else is going to do this because, well, they're commercial organizations. Why do they want to spend the money to do it? So I see what happens. It's frustrating because EPUBs are broadly there. I mean, there is a separate issue compared to a book that I just think the handling of images at the correct resolution and presentation is that there's a technical issue there that I don't quite understand how it is, but most ebooks I find subpar in that sense, which is why I'll read a novel in a Kindle or ebook reader, but I wouldn't read a textbook I really care about in an ebook form at the moment, because once you get away from the text, the quality of the presentation tends to fall apart. But I believe that I believe that's addressable. I guess I don't know where the impetus will come from for the conversation to move those things ahead. But there are lots of useful things, for instance, that have evolved in the hundreds of years we've used the print format, and things like footnotes, for instance, are really useful in the right place. And just sort of to leave them in the long grass would be wrong. Therefore, we have to have a conversation as to where that fits in a non-linear document, that isn't, in a sense, predicated on being printed out, even if it never is, which is sort of, that's the bind we're in at the moment. And we haven't moved our understanding of, so what we haven't gone and done is sort of gone back to say, okay, this is broadly what a document used to be. Where do we find a home for all the parts of it? So we've done the easy bit. We've sort of taken the body text, and we've done some very good stuff with sort of HTML. But there are other bits of the richness that we haven't yet ported across, and I think that's what's holding back some of the digital representation. So I don't think there are any insurmountable problems. It's where the conversation of all the necessary interested parties can take place. That'd be it.
I have to run in 30 seconds now, I guess. Just in terms of, I'm not going to say the swear word, but in terms of doing it, I made a tiny example in the chat as a Docker file. So it's making a container, and here it's to use Calibre, which has a converter. So you basically convert whatever in terms of document, text-based document, EPUB, and whatever, to PDF, and then potentially PDF to JPEG, and then using it in the headset. So it's very rough, let's say. It's not something beautiful, but it's something usable in terms of including kind of, I don't want to say whatever, but document-based kind of content in the headset. And then I had other things to do, but I'll keep it as a teaser for next time, and want to thank you, everyone. Gotta run. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Randall.
The subject of RTF isn't finished. I agree. One of the things that is so challenging about the position in history that we have is that we just haven't had the time with any of these technologies to really understand what we want out of them. Reading Fisher and Ong and other folks who have the ability to convey a deeper sense, and Blair, having the ability to see the deeper history of writing systems and the practical implications of these other sort of seemingly happenstance things that happened centuries ago, or for 4 centuries. The fact that it's arguable that the Latin character set was better positioned, but actually less better positioned than you would have expected than Arabic for a movable type printing. But that was just happenstance that it went through changes, because there are benefits for the way that Arabic is joined up and has uses ligatures and diacriticals for vowels and things like that. But it meant that it was worse positioned to be able to leverage offset movable type printing, and there were massive consequences for that in terms of how that meant that printing could kind of spread things tinted through the particular kind of lens that was going to come from it. And in that same way but that was because of changes, small evolutionary changes to the way that there's not that much, there's much less about English to Arabic that would have necessitated that the writing be the way that it is. But it underwent genuinely very long form evolutionary changes into a thing that meant that you could punch keys and get individual differentiable glyphs out of it. we just don't have any of that time for people to kind of live with the stability of a set of features in order to figure out what a set of capabilities are. And so, like the book is just not closed on linotype, let alone RTF, let alone any of these more modern things. But you know, we linotype's only what 100 and some years old, and that it's just really frustrating because a lot of people will say, well, we only need to look at the last 2-3 years of innovation, and it's more like we probably need to be taking seriously the possibility that we've left stuff on the table from the past 200 to 300 years in order to be able to seriously consider what we ought to be able to do with technology now.
I have a book. Mark, are you ready? Okay. So Stephen Mitten, a British guy, has written a new book called Language Puzzle, and he refers to the functional specialization and domain-specific thoughts, right? Which is related to my concern that we may be able to not have certain thoughts because they're going in different sections. This book is great for that section is great for that, but yes, Brandel, we have, for some of this, it's been very incremental and very, very slow. Absolutely. But I do believe that, so Leon and me are going to have to collaborate a lot more. And I do believe that we're at an incredibly interesting time in history, because before this year, because of that Vision Pro thing, the world was, we talked about rich media, and we talked about plain text, like there is such a thing as plain text. Of course there isn't. There's no such thing. You still have to have a typeface. I think we're at a point now where we can accept that the world is more than 2D as the base. So if we now, so when I look at XR fragments, of course, I'm thinking extended reality. If we now just put a stake in the ground and say that for the way we're going to be handling data, metadata, documents, dialogue, and so on, we have to take into account spatial positionality and context and connectivity. That's the base thought. We can start noting that down. We've talked about it for the last 2 to 3 years in different ways, but now it can mean something. I mean, I found that the Vision Pro for me to work in is practically useless today. But the only way I've found that out is by using it. It's a wonderful device for many things. But now we're at the point where we can use and try and realize a lot of it is nonsense. So if we can find ways, again, the most basic would be rich reference section. Secondly, Wendy Hall said exactly what you said, Brandel, a few years ago when I started my PhD. I'd like to be able to compose a document based on other things. Right? And this is very much what Alan has been showing us today as well. Pull things in, right? Don't retype it, don't plagiarize it. These are entirely possible now. And yes, I will put my version in Visual Meta, but there's no reason it can't also go in HTML and everything else. But when I did the Future of Text a few years ago at the London College of Communication, when I was a teacher, somebody asked about the origins of the internet. And I started telling the story of the students doing it, vid surfing them. They were just students at the time. None of us here are students right now. But who the hell else are going to do this? So if we now, while on Wednesdays we deal with design, because Andrew's doing the coding, and we have general discussions on Monday, if we can also deal with just creating these standards, pretending we own the world, I think there's a good chance we might end up owning the world. Just imagine in terms of, Dini and me handing in the Sloan reports with these standards that we're all credited on. We wanted it this way, but other people said this. We fought it out. We decided on this. That's a real valuable piece of work that we can do together because of that. And then we have this dude from Apple here who's making real things, right, Brandel? This is not an abstract discussion. What do you say? Should we try to have more standards talk?
The use of standards, what the standards should be in service of. Yeah, that's something that's important for me. What I do with standards is mostly strictly around spatial stuff. So that means actual literal 3D models and stuff like that. But I think that, as we sort of fill out our understanding of how information and space go together, those things can work in tandem. But yeah, in order to do that job, I should probably go and start another meeting.
Yeah,
this has been really awesome.
I see you have that other meeting, Brandel, but on Wednesday you're going to try to talk some of this stuff, standards and stuff this Wednesday as well. So I look forward to that. Well, whatever time you have on Wednesday, we're doing lots of other things.
Cool. Great. Thanks. Good to meet you. Fine.
All right, see you, Brandel, and the rest of us, I guess we're signing off. Mark has a comment. Anyone else, please feel free to chime. You have a muted comment. Okay, that's even shorter.
Sorry, just a very brief comment on the aspect of metadata is to build ourselves the time to at least loop more than once through it. I think one of the problems I'm seeing with a lot of projects I'm involved in the moment, everyone's in a rush to make metadata as the means to get to where they want to go, but the metadata tends up being a bit shonky as a result, because it's a thing of, so what do I want? What do I need to do what I want? And then looking back, said, okay, well, now I know that I need this. Is this actually a sort of useful and robust way to do it? And it's that little extra step that I think we tend to miss out at the moment. So that's something our practice should perhaps think more on.
Yeah, we should, and let's remind ourselves also that a lot of metadata is already there. Just don't throw it away. Alan, please.
Yes. Do you know that Adobe has worked on a rich PDF, and it wasn't really successful, but I think they have already dig the subject. But it could be perhaps interesting to understand where they handle this rich format, because no reason that it has no success, because they are part of the future, and I'm pretty sure that they have work on that matter, and it would be interesting to have contact with the product manager of this, because the rich PDF hasn't any success anyway. There are some reason, probably technical, probably let's say no agreement with other format, but it's, for me, Adobe must be the player of that matter, because they have so many connection to a different it could be design, it could be text, it could be video, and I think it must be a player somewhere in this in this understanding and the way the stuff must be handled in the future.
We have been in dialogue with Adobe on some of this, and the PDF standard is now externalized anyway. So we've been dialogue with that group. They don't want to change so much. They want to make sure things don't break. Was also a member of the PDF Association for a while for exactly this reason. And the only reason I'm a fan of PDF is universities demand it, and it lasts forever. That's it. Beyond that, they're awful. Right, I really wouldn't want to do a multimedia presentation. You have to look at it on an A4 on a computer screen. That would be an absolute joke. So, obviously we need to take the best from each different format and try to put it together. And I think the only way to succeed is through success. We'll just have to build something nice. Now, Alan, we have a grant from the Sloan Foundation to work on reading and writing in XR. It's an okay amount of money, but it means that at the next two hypertext forum conferences, we will be putting headsets on people, and it's mostly theater. People should feel that, oh, I can see differently and I can work here. And when we say it's mostly theater, the data has to be there to back it up, even if it's not ready. We need to, it's metadata all the way down. That's right, Mark. Yeah, I mean, the problem I have with finishing my thesis is probably my PhD thesis can be summed up in one sentence. If it's important, write what it is at the back of the document. That doesn't go down so well with my examiners, right? That is the entire philosophy. and it's very, very extensible. And so many people in this community have added all kinds of things. Like Peter has added the notion of extra visual metas that can be deleted. That's fantastic. You know, we use it for AI at the moment. Anyway, I also have to go. Emily's made barbecue chicken today using her mother's recipe, which she finally found, which is lovely. I look forward to seeing some of you on Wednesday, the rest on Monday. Alan, you are welcome anytime. You can come and go as you want. There's no special need to be
Okay.
in or out. And also, as you may have noticed, some people today came and left in the middle. That's life. That's what has to happen. It's not considered a bad thing. All right. Thank you, everyone. And Leon, we got work to do. Bye.
Thank you.